Hey, welcome everybody to we are very fortunate today. We got some great panelists for this How 5G Will Change Music. Brief introduction, myself, I'm Matt Ward. I've been kicking around the pro audio industry for about 30 years. And I've been, one of my clients is a Swedish startup called Elk, which makes a very low latency operating system, which is being utilized in 5G trials for doing music real-time over the internet. It's a partnership with Ericsson. We're doing real-time jamming over the internet. We'll talk a little bit more about that. We also have with us Alan Parsons, we're really, really pleased to have, who needs no introduction, but I'll give him one anyway. He started out at Abbey Road and produced Dark Side of the Moon, did some hit albums with acts like Ambrosia, he's taking a break from a world tour right now to come and talk to us. There are probably some other things you were doing here as well. And
if I produced Dark Side of the Moon, I would be
did I say produced?
phoning in my part from my yacht in the Bahamas.
Engineered.
Engineered.
Thank you. And we also have, let's see, I'll go in order. We have Kunal Jathal from Verizon, who is involved with their virtual reality and 3D audio platform. Very, very interesting use of audio and visual, which he'll talk about. That's very reliant on 5G. On the far end, we have Bill Goodman from Ericsson, who's a real expert in 5G infrastructure. Ericsson is very involved in building out the hardware, and he'll have a lot of information for us about where 5G is at, where it's going, and what's required. And then we also have Jim Odom, who's the founder and president of PreSonus, a legendary audio company, also makes a DAW, the Studio One, and lots of other products great for creating music and audio. He's also a regular gigging musician himself, and will bring the perspective of both a gear manufacturer and how 5G will affect what they're doing. So without, I'd like to get into really start off with a question for Bill and for Kunal. To just give us a little bit of an introduction about what 5G is and what it's going to be, because I think that there are a lot of misconceptions about what it is and what it will be and what that impact would be. So maybe each of you take a minute to talk about that.
All right. Thank you, Matt. So 5G, I think it's most important to start with what it isn't. And it isn't simply faster 4G. I mean, it starts there, of course, but it's so much more than that. It's really an end-to-end fantastic innovation platform. And it's rolling out in stages. You started to see it roll out really late 2008, and then with a fixed wireless 5G, and then in early 2018, sorry, in early 2019, mobility came in. And then in 2020, you'll start to see the rest of the network with things like mobile edge compute to really complete that end-to-end platform. So it's really this fantastic innovation platform that's programmable, not only on the edges, but also the network is programmable. And those are the things that really we're seeing spur innovation. So super low latency, high throughput, upstream, downstream, high density of devices. So you can imagine in venues, you can have high performance to every single user in a seat, very high performance, and a lot of programmability. And really, that's just the high level of 5G. We can get into a lot more of it, but think of it as a brand new innovation platform, lots of capabilities, lots of programmability.
Yeah, I think that's a great start, and you hit a lot of the points that I wanted to make myself. For people that have never ever heard about 5G, and I don't think there's many people in the room that might fall under that category, but to the layman, I usually like to describe 5G as internet for your phone. And there's two ways to get internet on your phone, right? Either you're connected to a Wi-Fi network of some sort, or you're getting it just magically through your cellular network. So 5G is the next generation of digital cellular network technology that allows you to get data on your phone. I think the thing that Bill said about how not to think of 5G as just faster 4G is kind of the best way to really conceptualize what 5G is. The two most publicly advertised aspects of 5G are low latency and high bandwidth. That's just a way of saying that you can get data really quickly and you can send a lot of data from one device to another. But the real power of 5G comes when you kind of try to think a little into the future of the kinds of experiences that it would unlock, and what is it exactly that you can do with lower latency and higher bandwidth. Sometimes I kind of like to compare 4G and 5G as horses and cars as modes of transportation, right? So a car is faster than a horse, and a car can carry more people than a horse. But it would be really faulty to think of a car as just a faster horse, right? There's an entire realm of experience that is opened up to consumers of this technology. There's so much, there's like intelligence that's built into cars, right? Cars can then communicate with each other. There's like energy efficiency implications, and a lot of those parallels move quite accurately onto 5G as well, because there's 5G is more energy efficient than 4G as well, and 5G enables a whole host of experience that we wouldn't ordinarily have with 4G. And another way I like to make the description of 5G a little more real is to try and think about the kinds of experiences we got when we went from 3G to 4G. Apps like ride sharing, so Lyft, Uber, Google Maps, even just music streaming. These are all new paradigms that were unwrapped because 4G brought in a whole host of advantages that 3G didn't have. So when thinking about 5G in relation to 4G, the real question is, what is going to be the Google Maps and, the ride sharing of 5G? What are the new experiences that 5G is sort of going to unlock? And that's why 5G is really exciting.
Well, let's think about that in the context of music, right? And how it would impact music. And people have been doing collaborations over the internet. I know, Alan, you did an album last year, The Secret. Yes, that was the one from last year. And you have some fans here. So if you pirated it, you're not allowed to clap. Just so you know. So if you maybe could talk a little bit about some of the collaboration you did with some of the artists and what kind of worked and didn't work about that, and maybe we can talk a little bit about how 5G might solve some of those problems.
Well, I'm one of the rare breed of internet users who doesn't have cable. My internet comes in through a microwave dish pointed at a mountaintop. It's not the fastest speed in the world. We used a program a lot of you will know about if you're into recording. It's called Source Connect, and it allows essentially internet recording over infinite distances. We did have connectivity problems with the speed that I had during the making of this album, but what excites me if 5G is going to be able to deliver a better speed. I don't know if it's even feasible to have it come over the microwave dish, but if it can be on my phone, then that's fine too. Yeah, I mean, another problem we ran into. We were hoping that we would be able to point a camera at the artist performing. I recorded Jason Mraz doing a vocal in Chicago while I was in Santa Barbara. The way Source Connect works is that it doesn't really matter how much latency there is, because he's working to a track in real time at his end. He's singing in sync with the track that he's working with at his end. When it comes to me, both tracks are arriving simultaneously, so it's in sync. It might have been happening literally 2 or 3 seconds later, but it works. It's unfortunately just a fact of life that working in both directions at the same time cannot possibly work ever. because it's just a fact of life that the time delay that exists from the source getting to the destination and then the destination going back to the source, it can't possibly happen at the same time. Even if it's lightning fast, even if it was like 20 milliseconds, that's still not actually good enough, unfortunately.
Well, let's talk about latency a little bit, because that's something that's near and dear to musicians. Anybody who's recorded, anybody who walks around the show and listens to the pitches from various manufacturers, particularly audio interface manufacturers. So you said the figure 20 milliseconds as being unacceptable, and yet there are some applications, like there was a real-time jamming proof of concept that we did with Ericsson, where we were getting into that range, in some cases even into single digits, and we were using fiber at sometimes and sometimes a 5G network to show that this worked. So what is that number? What is the number that you would say then, I can use this?
I was just talking to my assistant, Noah, this morning. Some people are uncomfortable with 5 milliseconds, literally.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're wearing headphones and you're playing guitar, 5 seconds is enough to make it not sound like you're really playing that guitar. And of course, we have to put up with a certain amount of latency in our standard digital recording software. But there are means to get zero latency at all stages, but I just think that for professional purposes, even 5 milliseconds is too much.
Yeah. So thinking about that in the context of 5G and how that's gonna roll out, can you two guys, and I'm gonna get to you in just a second, Jim, but could you two guys comment on that? What is we've talked about the sort of the stages of 5G and the different, breaking that apart a little bit and how that's going to roll out and how that will specifically impact latency.
All right. So the in the first generation of 5G, which is out now, we're talking about single-digit millisecond. And when I say single-digit millisecond, I'm talking about the access part of the network. And of course, if you have two endpoints that are in the same city, the middle part is shorter than if one's in LA and one's in New York. So you got to factor that in. So single-digit, sub 10 millisecond on that round trip. And then in a next generation of 5G, which is kind of actively under development now, we add the capabilities to get less than 1 millisecond. So that's when really interesting things begin to happen, when the round trip on that radio access link is less than 1 millisecond. And so when you couple that with a mobile edge compute now that is on the other end of that 1 millisecond. So now you can turn 1 millisecond, there's your heavy-duty high-performance compute right there, and then 1 millisecond back, and maybe there's a couple milliseconds in between if you have friends in 100 miles away, a different city. Now you can really think about the possibility of a recording studio on your phone, essentially, because if you're that close. And I'll admit, for professional purposes, there's nothing like zero, right? There's nothing like everything being right there. But we really think in terms of extending the market for orders of magnitude more people being able to use this capability that wouldn't have access to professional resources. If you can put it in the cloud and have multiple people use it, a couple milliseconds away or less than a millisecond away, that's really what we see as one of the kind of game-changing capabilities that 5G would bring to the music industry.
But it has to be said that even if the latency was 1 millisecond, if you're dealing with somebody in Sydney, Australia,
right,
you can't change the laws of physics.
That's exactly right.
The speed of light, or the speed of electrical impulses, is the same as the speed of light, and you can't change that, sadly.
Yeah, no, I mean, your scenario of having Jason Mraz in Chicago and you're in Santa Barbara, yeah, that's just speed of light problem. But for an extended, metropolitan region, right? Yeah. You're in Santa Barbara recording somebody who's in LA who doesn't want to fight traffic to come to your studio. Maybe you'd fire that guy and get somebody who would. I don't know. But those kinds of things I think are possible in getting into that kind of data. I want to ask Jim, as a equipment manufacturer, one of the things that 5G is going to cause is an explosion of Internet of Things devices. So all kinds of different devices are going to get connected to the, be able to be connected to the internet, and that'll be an expectation for a lot of devices. And just maybe talk a little bit about some of the products that you manufacture and how you think about how that could impact that and open opportunities for you.
Well, I mean, the latency thing is huge, right? So once people get confidence that that's for real, and we deal with it all the time, from just the recording system to the computer and back. You know, so when I hear these guys talking about going to Chicago and back, you know, I'm like, I'm Missouri, show me, you know, because it just seems so hard to understand a little bit. You know, we deal with these networks that we have now, the AVB network systems that we have, and we have latency management and packets, you know, packet switching. Every time we go over a switch, we lose something, you know, each time. So it depends on how many switches are from here to Chicago. Does that affect it? I'm just asking the question. And if we can, you know, you kind of have to have like a priority for your stream over the millions of others. Would that be important? And
it's important, yes, and it's another. You're bringing up another factor. So I don't want to interrupt you, but if it's a perfect lead-in for another capability. But I'll come to it after you're done.
It has to do with the Internet of Things, right? So if I have large groups of people that we want to connect to something, I guess 20, 40 doesn't matter milliseconds. If you're a listener, it doesn't make any difference. If we're communicating together, or say, you know, this jamming over the internet thing, we've been watching that kind of unfold for years. There was a company called, I think, UJam, maybe? I don't remember. Or eJam. Yeah, they were setting up in Frankfurt every year, and they were showing this jam session. You'd go listen, you go like, hell no, I can't play with that. You know, it's like, if it has to be, for me as a guitarist, I'm comfortable at about 3 milliseconds. Anything above that, I start to complain a little bit. And then I'll have guys tell me, well, your speaker cabinet's at least 3 feet away. Doesn't that bother you? But it's not the same thing, you know, because that's what I naturally hear. So this is an unnatural feeling. So as far as devices, you know, we manufacture all sorts of interfaces. We also manufacture devices for beat creation and all the pads and all that. Those are super critical and to how you feel. I know drummers are hypersensitive to anything over a millisecond or two, especially guys that I work with. And so yeah, but I could see down the road, you know, mixers, especially like small digital mixers up to large scale digital mixers, being able to share concerts, and we can have a global concert. Why not, right? And everything streams everywhere. I remember watching Farm Aid when I was a kid, I think, you know, and that was pretty cool. I think maybe I streamed it. I'm not sure. Somehow, one of those big concerts, I don't know. But so, you know, to be able to share music on a worldwide basis, like let's say we're all going to do a worldwide concert for the fires in Australia, right? So how would we do that, and everything in real time? There's some really cool uses for this. And so as a manufacturer, I'm going to be waiting for endpoint silicon that's affordable that I can stick in an IoT device. I can't afford a server like that to drop into an interface. That would be untenable, right? Yeah. So, but if we're driven by the microprocessor and the software vendors, you know. So we're like the doctors waiting on the pharmacy to come up with the right drug, and then we'll push it on everybody we know. So that. Yeah.
Okay.
That's kind of how we roll.
Bill, I think Jim was kind of leading you right into, you wanted to talk a little bit about network slicing, I think, so why don't you take that up?
Yeah, exactly right. And by the way, the industry is on the second generation of silicon for 5G already, and the second generation is really starting to get at the things, right, rather than just the first initial phones. Yeah. But what you started out with, you talked a little bit about, you know, am I going to be able to tell the network this is what I need and reserve it and guarantee and prioritize? And Matt mentioned the term network slicing. So another kind of new aspect of 5G that didn't exist before is this concept of network slicing, which is really it can be many different networks to many different types of devices and applications. So you're going to have, you know, a sensor on a water meter that needs to blip once in a while. That needs very different resources and performance than a pair of glasses that are augmented reality enabled, connecting to a mech that's driving that. And that's very different than a production camera that's streaming high quality video upstream. And so network slicing allows a device or an application to contract with the network on the priority it needs, the bandwidth it needs uplink and downlink, the latency it needs, and the network can make trade-offs in latency for efficiency. If something really needs low latency, it can throw a lot more resources at it. It's more expensive, but the applications that don't need it don't pay for that. And that's called network slicing, and that we think is also really an important feature of 5G as far as an innovation platform that lets it serve a lot of different needs predictably, you know, and reliably.
Yeah, so there's telematics, right, for vehicles. That's probably going to be one of the very top ones.
Yeah, well, you know, as much as connected vehicles and driver assist, there's a lot of things that can go over the network, but there's certain functions in the car that are never going to leave the car, just for, you know, absolute reliability. But there's a lot that can leave the car, and we think they work together. It's the same with any device. It's the same with the augmented reality glasses. There's some functions like which way you're looking, so it knows how to paint, that have to be in the glasses. But all that, you know, computer vision and processing and mapping can all be in the cloud. So you're gonna, in many of these cases, you're gonna leave maybe 10% of the functionality on a device, be able to move 90% of the functionality into the network.
Okay. Alan, I want to ask you about, in addition to everything else you're doing, I know you're also partnered with Julian Kolbeck in Art and Science of Sound Recording, which is an educational, you create a lot of content for educational institutions, and there's online courses and all sorts of things. And you also do a lot of master classes where I know you're already using Skype and some tools like that to share. Could you maybe talk about that a little bit and some of the pain points there, and how maybe, you know, 5G could help you broadcast out more widely?
Well, I mean, obviously, high quality video would be extraordinary if we could achieve it in real time. I obviously talked about using Source Connect when we found that if we were running Source Connect and trying to put a video picture on the screen at the same time, it was a disaster. So we had to go FaceTime to get the picture, and Source Connect to do the audio. So it would be great if we could do audio and video at the same time. I'd just like to once again reiterate that provided that the performing artist is working in real time with the track that he's hearing at that moment, that's all that matters, because it doesn't matter if we receive it 10 minutes later, it's going to be in sync. And I just wanted to make that clear. In terms of masterclasses, yes, we could branch out and start doing video classes in real time, interactively, hopefully, with people asking questions in real time. That'd be great. For the live stage, I'm not really sure there's much to be gained by higher speed, other than people with their crappy iPhone videos uploading to YouTube much quicker.
Well, that's no, but they'd be far less crappy videos. That's the key. No, actually, I think it would be good for Kunal to talk a little bit about your 3D audio project and how that's relating to some of the things, perhaps the Chainsmokers thing.
Yeah, sure. I mean, first of all, I also think it's kind of important to contextualize the conversation on latency a little bit. So, maybe in scenarios of collaborative musicianship, it's important to have, less than 3 milliseconds or 1 millisecond or whatever that figure is that allows a musician to feel that they're not being impeded by, the latency. But then, as Bill mentioned, there's a wide variety of applications that all leverage the benefit of 5G, and depending on what your application is, even within the music space, your latency requirements are going to be different, right? So, for example, what we do at Verizon XR, personally, I work on the audio engine for the platform, and let's say you have a really low-powered Android phone. We're able to deliver really rich, compelling virtual reality and augmented reality experiences to your low-powered Android phone. And I'm talking both in terms of visuals, so like graphics processing, and also really computationally intense audio processing. Because spatializing audio in virtual reality, there's a lot of math that's going on, lots of digital signal processing, lots of acoustics. None of that is actually happening on your phone, right? All the intense computation is happening on the mech, which is mobile edge compute for people that might, we've thrown the term mech around a few times, but so the mech is basically just this server that's, you know, located on the edge of the network. And it's on the mech where all this audio processing is happening. And the reason you're able to have that functionality delivered to your Android device is because your device is connected to the mech with 5G. In this context, we have what's called a motion to photon latency, which is the latency figure that's required in a virtual reality experience for the user to not feel the disconnect, for the user to be convinced, right? Because if you move physically in the real world and you move in virtual reality as well, there needs to be a certain latency. It needs to be under a certain value for you to feel convinced that, oh yeah, I'm in virtual reality. So that figure is around 20 milliseconds, a little under 20 milliseconds. So at Verizon, what we're able to do is we are able to have spatial audio APIs that are deployed to the mech, and they're basically doing all this, long, intense convolution reverbs and all sorts of audio-related calculations, and we're able to stream it, round trip from the user maybe turning their head in virtual reality and all the audio processing that needs to happen, along with all sorts of spatial audio sound effects, so sound occlusion, reflections based on materials in the room, all sorts of intense sonic processing. And we're able to get that, to the user in under 20 milliseconds. And then there's also a way to do that in a lossless way, which I can probably address at some other point in time. But that's kind of what we do at Verizon. And my larger point here is just that there's a host of different scenarios for using 5G in audio and in music, and not all of them are going to require a single-digit millisecond latencies.
What's interesting about that from a live music performance standpoint, and for example, the Chase Center in San Francisco, which is a newly opened arena, there's an integrated 5G network, right, that's just for the building, and the Chainsmokers did a show there, which Verizon was involved in, and augmented reality content was sent to everybody's 5G device in sync with the music. So the Chainsmokers programmed a bunch of interesting graphics and things that they wanted to do that were all in part of the performance. So that's an example of how it would work. Me personally, when I go to a concert, I'm not holding my phone. I'm actually listening to the music. Right. That may be a generational thing, but I think that's an example of something that can.
And I think that's kind of a nice example because it's an example of how 5G can be relevant to music, and in some sense why Verizon has invested interest in it, but it's not explicitly, there's no audio data involved, right? Because at the Chainsmokers concert, it was an augmented reality experience, and it was visual. There were graphics that were being overlaid, in time to the performance, in time to the music. But that's another compelling use case for 5G, which is concerts and just live venues and performances. And that's something that Verizon's also.
I don't see how you
for.
could have audio, because the audio delay from the stage to me can be different no matter wherever I am. So your latency, you see what I mean? So if you're trying to sync things together, the audio is not going to be synced wherever. If I'm in the stadium, I'm way in the back, I need a much longer delay.
Bill had something about that.
I mean, you could apply the same principle as delay towers, in a standard PA environment, right?
Right, exactly. You have to upgrade your phone every verse. Yeah, you have to.
Yeah, I think I happened to be at the Consumer Electronics Show last week in Las Vegas. I was walking by this very interesting construction site of this big round building. It's MSG Sphere. I don't know if anybody's heard of that. It's a new type of venue. MSG is a Madison Square Garden company. They're putting the first one up in Las Vegas. They have some other ones planned, and it's a round building. It's a 17,000 person venue for concerts and other performances, and it's drastically different on a lot of levels. But what they say on their website is they're putting in a network that presumably is 5G, 25 megabits per seat to every person of 17,000 people. And they're doing, again, presumably they haven't released a lot of the details, but augmented reality experiences, making the audience part of the platform for the performance and for the venue. So maybe it's audio, maybe it's some people might bring their own headphones, which are higher quality, but I know they're doing audio beamforming as well. Maybe it's augmented reality. It's a big investment by someone who feels that they're not just playing around with this. They're popping down billion-dollar venues. So it'd be very interesting to pay attention to that one as an example of what could be possible if you really have the kind of network that can connect every member of the audience and the venue and the performance all together with super high performance, low latency connectivity. What could you do with that? There's some folks who are trying to find out.
Okay, I think a takeaway I have from what Alan had to say about latency I thought was really kind of fascinating, which was that give me no latency, and there is no problem. I know how to record without latency in the studio, and I don't care so much about latency. It's great to get stuff high quality, great to get it quickly, but it doesn't have to be. There doesn't have to be, the instantaneous collaboration. It can each party on each end can do it with no latency in their time, and then it's in sync for you when you get it. So it's just the benefit is getting it more quickly and in higher quality, but not necessarily the.
Yeah, I mean, I think the quality issue would be important if 5G can take it from MP3 quality up to, say, a good 24-bit quality, then in real time or in almost real time, as it were.
Yeah.
That would be great, because Source Connect currently operates a little better than MP3 as you hear it. Then the principle is that you can still produce, you can still say that was a great performance, even though you're hearing it MP3 quality, but then in the background the file is updating, and you then download it in high quality.
Yeah, this is something that we've actually done at Verizon XR, and it's not exactly in the same circumstance, so it's not from a live performance, music performance perspective, but we've run these demos where we have like raw PCM files, so like WAV files, 24-bit, 32-bit, 48K, 96K, doesn't really matter. And we're able to stream them from the mech to a user device losslessly. So we basically encode them to FLAC. FLAC goes over the network and then gets decoded from FLAC, back to PCM data on the user device, another currency of 5G is essentially the fact that it's very high bandwidth, right? So you can kind of like pipe a lot of data into a single stream, and so we were able to do this with 100 different sources concurrently. So it was this VR experience where it was essentially like a large symphony. And the 100 sources represented 100 different instruments in this symphonic space, and you were able to walk around in the space in virtual reality and hear all the instruments, being produced losslessly, like with FLAC. And again, this was subject to a sub 20 millisecond latency, but it's entirely convincing for that particular use case. But my point here is that 5G can enable high quality, lossless, really, audio streaming, over the network. So.
Yeah.
Well, that's encouraging. I find that very encouraging.
Cool.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah.
That's well, the Music Connect project that Elk did with Ericsson, and they've done demonstrations all over the world at different trade shows and for different kind of events. It's all sort of proof of concept showing the potential of 5G, And we've done these kind of real-time jamming sessions, which have in the single digit to upwards of low teens kind of latency, but the musicians are able to play together. Distances up to 30 miles we've done. And that has created a lot of interest from, for example, there are several companies that have online DAWs where you sign on, you record. Spotify has one in a Soundtrap. There's another company, a Foundation. And these companies are interested in the ability to be able to potentially have their customers connect and record in real time, or at least much more quickly than they are now. So that's part of a move to lots of services that could happen online because of the increased speed and latency. One of my favorite companies that I saw here at the show, this just really tickled me because I'm an old analog guy, having been at Universal Audio for years and been around for a long time. There's a company called Analog Access that has a huge library of old analog processors that they've attached a robot knob tweakers on, and they've developed a plugin, and you sign on and you can, from your studio, control with their plugin their analog hardware that's in the cloud, right? And you send your audio to them, it goes through their processors, and it comes back to you. There's with delay in the hundreds of milliseconds. But think about something like that, and of course there's a very easy jump to thinking about doing that with plugins and adding those to augment what is offered in online DAWs, because that's one of the big downsides is they don't support all the plugins that are out there. And that leads to a question that Jim, PreSonus makes a really excellent DAW in Studio One. Have you guys kicked around the idea of having an online version of that?
We've been discussing it for 10 years, and a lot of it had to do with connectivity into the internet. So we were talking a few minutes ago about an edge server, so to speak, on the edge of some of these 5G networks. And Studio One running in that environment, I could see this possible in universities and places where you just have a whole lot of different rooms and people that wanted to record and play. But we ran into roadblocks with just recording to the cloud and back, and being an older analog guy, it's like I didn't really trust the sound very much. I wasn't quite convinced that I was really getting 24-bit, even 48K. But if we wanted 96K audio recording, we're kind of critical on phasing between tracks and things like that. And so that sort of thing sort of kept us from experimenting even more. But we think about it, quite often. So.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, in general, it sounds like you're in a little bit of kind of wait and see mode, and let's see if that, which makes sense. There's got to be customer demand for that, and in order for that, so that's where
we don't mind being on the bleeding edge ever, because I've done it and it kind of hurts sometimes. But yeah, it's a great idea. It simplifies a lot of things, really. So.
I'm getting the blinky lights. I had another question for Alan, and then I wanted to open up, leave some time for some questions, if you guys have some questions. But Alan, you have opened up your studio now in Santa Barbara to outside projects, and I wonder if now with everything we've discussed and the idea that there could be some increased bandwidth, maybe really improving some of the performance of something like Studio Connect that you've already used. How much do you think that could enhance your not just your own production work, but this commercial facility aspect of your studio?
I think in this day and age, the concept of each performer being in his own environment is a dream come true.
Yeah.
I mean, do we really want to fly guys from London to Santa Barbara just because they're a great singer or a great guitar player? He'd much rather sit in his home studio and work with me at a distance. So.
Well, it rains a lot there.
So it saves on airfares, it saves saves jet lag, it saves all kinds of things. So I do think there is a big future in recording at a distance, and if 5G can deliver better quality audio quicker and with good pictures to go with it, then I think the future is very exciting.
Sign you up. Okay, if there are questions from the audience? Somebody got it. We have one over here?
Yeah, my first question
That sounds right up your street.
Well, I can take the second part. I don't know the first part. Somebody else take that.
Well, I think the first part is how there are all kinds of platforms out there for how to get to to stream music to people, and that's not really. I don't know that there's any expertise in that area up here. It's marketing and distribution.
I guess what I'm getting at, should I focus on making sure that my music gets produced in
Focus on making sure it's good. I would start there. That's number one. And then I think, and getting it, how it's distributed. There's just there are lots of different avenues, and there's so much debate and best practices discussion and all about what's the best way to distribute and market music, and that's that's really a different category. But the bandwidth thing.
And the bandwidth. So yes, the frequencies we in the industry we think of low band, mid band, and high band. And prior to 5G, that high band, which is like 28 gigahertz and the very high, was not usable. And 5G has some technical innovations and developments in the network that makes that usable. And once it's usable, that's where the huge bandwidth, super low latency is, and all the extra capacity. So that's where you have 5G that is really fiber equivalent and can solve issues like when you live somewhere that there's no fiber and there never will be. 5G is the fiber equivalent option when it comes there, and it's a lot easier to get out to places than fiber. But 5G you'll see across all three bands. Some operators are launching on the millimeter wave, the high stuff first. Some are launching on the low stuff first. There's differences in reach and performance, and then really it's the combination of those over time that'll be overall. The 5G will be across all three of those.
But it's the same speed no matter what the frequency.
The characteristics are different. In the high bands, there's a lot more capacity available, so you can get in the high, 10 gigabit, 20 gigabit, possibly speeds. Yeah.
Yeah, there's generally like a trade-off between the speed and the reach because so at Verizon we are putting our eggs in like the high band basket, so we call it like millimeter wave technology. So that's like super fast, but one of the downfalls is you need to have this like line of sight kind of relationship with the 5G node, which is just a way of saying that it's not going to be really able to go through walls. And if your 5G node is in one room and if you're in another room and there's furniture in the way, that could be a problem. And then once you go to lower bands, the waves are able to have greater coverage, but then the speed goes down a little bit. So it's just a matter of trying to find the sweet spot there.
Another question here?
Hi. I thought that I heard that the United States government was not supportive of 5G and they're expecting to block it. Is that true?
No, that's not true. That's not true. Vladimir Putin is this. I'm not joking. This is true. He's not supportive of it because Russia's behind, and he's doing lots of things to try to undo it. You can make up your own mind how connected Vladimir Putin is to the current United States government. Brian's right. There's a specific Chinese company, Huawei, who's very involved in 5G, and they've banned like sales to them and things like that. But it's not 5G, the format. It's this particular company that's involved in 5G. Any other? Down here.
Question about engineering. So, like Dark Side of the Moon or any of those albums, do you see getting the core band together in the room, or do you think that they could collaborate on a global level and still make that tight integrated music?
I'm a great one for having a band in a room in the early stages of recording a backing track. When it comes to overdubs, I mean, I think a singer or a guitar player, a soloist working at a distance after the main track's been recorded is absolutely fine. But I will always push towards having a band on the initial session in the same room.
If I may ask a last question, I'm still intrigued by that use case of people playing in real time or almost real time, even if they can't be in the same room. Let's assume it's a rehearsal. They're still figuring it out.
Yeah.
This is a use case that I, even as a hobby musician, would find really compelling. So what was your experience in those proof of concept trials?
Yeah.
What did it feel like for them?
It's a great question, because I think it's important to point out that there are a lot of people who enjoy playing music and playing music together, who Alan would probably not let in his studio. So there's and they can have great experiences, and in fact, yes. I mean, for example, the one that I was actually personally involved in was, we were in Stockholm, and we had a drummer in one location, and someone playing synth bass in another location, and somebody playing guitar at our offices in Stockholm. And I think that the total distance apart was, help me, Stefano, 20 kilometers, something like that, 25 kilometers. So that it absolutely felt to the musicians, and it felt to us like everybody was playing in real time. They really weren't. And I think we were in that day, we were running with fiber, and I think we were in the, low, 6-7 millisecond delay. So you absolutely can have those experiences, and certainly for something like, whether it's your real-time jamming or working out a tune or taking a lesson, getting a lesson, those kinds of things I think are absolutely is applicable for it.
Thank you. You made Wolfgang very happy.
Okay, that's right.
Could the musicians see each other in that scenario?
Yes, and actually we also ran into that problem that Alan was talking about, that you can't have the video sync. So we've got a Skype connection so we can talk to each other, but really having the talk back over the audio, so that was still in sync with the music, using the same connection was the right way to do it, because having the video and audio in sync, we weren't there yet. I think we will get there.
Absolutely, yeah. That's just an application problem. You'll solve that, yeah.
Yeah. So,
Yeah,
yes.
you have to, all the sessions that I did, you had to make sure that the talkback mic was switched off at the other end, because otherwise you would hear your own voice coming back 2 seconds later. So that's partly, I think, in the software design.
Okay, we're now
to get
officially
around that problem.
17 seconds over, so this has to be our last question.
Not a problem. Real quick. So I'm in the process of putting a studio space together, and I want to take advantage of some of the configurations that you all are talking about. If it's put a placeholder in and do it later, or even get it done. My question is, what are the best sources to help me to get through that implementation of some of the things of what we're talking about now, either preparing for it or actually implementing it, kind of telling me how to create this thing.
You're talking about working at a distance with others?
Yes, creating the ability to do that in the studio that I'm creating now.
Wouldn't the answer be that you're dependent upon the 5G getting rolled out in your area and covering the other areas that you would want to work in? And maybe making sure that you've got Ethernet, throughout your building, so everything is connected inside the facility.
So that's what I'm talking about, is it Ethernet, and what else goes along with that? Is there a Dante configuration or something else that would have to go with that? The protocols that would have to be put in place, and server networking.
No, I think it's really about getting the carrier coverage. I mean, you have to wait for the service to roll out.
And no other hardware considerations.
No, I think you're right. I mean, your notion is right. I mean, I think what we're talking about here is something that really the industry has to adopt, and innovators are going to start building these things, because the 5G has really just rolled out, and the industries are really starting to learn about it. So I think the first step is they take prototypes like the one we did, Ericsson and Elk together, and that gets commercialized and starts to build out. Companies here will start to commercialize moving capabilities and equipment into the cloud, and then that's what you need. And so that hasn't really that's what's kind of happening, just starting now.
And I want to follow that.
And then you really need to follow that, and as that becomes available, you're an early adopter of some of those capabilities.
That's exactly what I'm talking about. So you said Ericsson. Is there? Maybe I can talk to you about it after. But how do I get to the one thing that I should be following?
We
talk
do
to
need
us
wrap
afterwards.
up. I want to thank all of you for coming. I want to thank our most excellent panelists. Really appreciate it. Thanks very much.